guys, it's me, Robin, RsIslandCrafts. One of the ladies my son works with, Kelsey, she is really a big Disney fan. She goes to Disney World all the time down here, all the events. She collects the pins. She goes to anything they've got going on, she's always there doing something. And one of the things she likes is the Mickey Mouse ears. Basically, it's just big Mickey Mouse ears from fabric with stuffing inside like you put in a pillow and glued to a headband. They tend to get a little expensive, $25 and up, depending on what you purchase and what the little add-ons they have on them are. And she can't always find what she wants. So she brings me the supplies and I go ahead and make them for her. I had started working on them last night and I thought maybe you guys might want to see how they're made. So basically, jammed here on the table, you will find all the different supplies that I use. I think I've grabbed just about everything. Today I have two sets of ears I will be making, a Lilo and Stitch, and I believe this one is for Ursula. It's a purple fabric with sequins. Nice and shiny. I've never worked with sequin fabrics, so this should be interesting. She chose the headbands. She either gets them at Joann's or Michael's, or you can even get them at the Dollar Trees. Black one for Ursula. And Lilo and Stitch. I believe Stitch is her favorite. So this one will go for that. I have not so nice a pair of scissors for cutting the sequins. I tested it out and I can actually cut straight through the sequins without making too much of a mess. It's like cutting with fur though. You're going to have little half sequins all over the place. Then I have my good scissors for cutting the fabric. I have a Sharpie for drawing out the design. And I like to use the friction pens. They disappear with heat. Now, some people like them, some people don't. In cold weather below 40 or below 0, I'm not sure what it is, it will it'll come back. So if it's like on the outside of a quilt and you used a red pen on some white fabric, if you didn't cover it with an applique or quilting or something and it got cold, the writing can come back. I drew out an embroidery design once and then I went and put iron-on fusible on the back, not even interfacing, not even thinking about it, and my whole design disappeared. I cried. Then I remembered that it comes back in cold, so I stuck it in the freezer for a couple hours and the whole drawing came right back. So it is accurate. Pins. We're going to be using a hot glue gun, and I keep my glue sticks in an old cold meat container. And then what I went ahead is, I'll put a link down to a pattern. You can basically, if you Google Mickey Mouse ears DIY, you'll come up with the different patterns. They have them for cutting the fabric, your sewing line, and where to put foam on the inside. I went ahead and I had an old report cover from my kids when they were younger and in school, and I wanted to see through, so when I cut out the design, the one on the sequins is no big deal, but I knew I wanted to get Lilo and Stitch, and if I did it with the cardboard, this is an old file folder I just glued it to, I wouldn't be able to see for placement. So I went ahead and I just traced it out on something see-through. You can use even these lids. You can see through these enough to see where your basic design is. I'm not sure if it's going to come up on camera, but I can basically see the darkness of the colors here. So anything you have that you can see through, you can use. I think if you couldn't find any other option, what I was going to do was use a Ziploc bag. My gallon size ones or the freezer ones are a little bit sturdier, and you can go ahead and use that. Oh, and I got some fiberfill to stuff the ears with because she likes hers to be a little bit poofy and not the flat ones. So if I forgot anything else, I'll go ahead and let you know, and I will try to make a list down below so you can look and see what you need. You'll notice one of my cutouts does say 1/4 inch foam, like you can get from a craft store. I don't have any right now in my supplies, and with the whole hurricane and everything that had come through, there isn't necessarily a lot of stores that are actually open, and we are saving on gas. So right now, I'm going to see what it looks like. These are meant to go inside. It'll hold its shape and allow it to stand up and stay straight. But I'm thinking with the stuffing, if I stuff it right, it's going to be fine. And if not, since these aren't anything that are going to be washed, I will go ahead and use a manila file folder and use that inside. because the foam is a lot more flexible than this file folder, so it should be fine. Now the Lilo and Stitch one, you can see where I've already cut off a chunk. This is a 1/4 yard of fabric. I'm pretty sure she got it at Joann's. And what I'm going to do first is I'm going to trace around my designs. This is the back of the fabric. If you use it from the front, there's a chance that you could see your markings, and that's not what you want to see on the outside of your Mickey ears. If I was making regular Mickey ears and I was just using straight black fabric, I would go ahead and fold it so that right sides were together, and then I could just trace around. But because I want to pick and choose my design, I'm going to do one ear at a time. And you're going to need a front and back and a front and back for each ear, so you need 4 pieces. I took my sewing line and I just laid it on one of the designs I liked. I decided, since there is a waving hello and a kissing one, that I would do one on each ear. So the front of the ear would have both designs and the back of the ear will have both designs. So I just laid it down. I made sure, since this is the sewing line one, that I didn't want to get it too close to the sewing line because I didn't want to lose it as I was stitching it. When you stuff these, they're kind of curved because you have 2 round circles and you're stuffing them together like a little pillow. So I want to try to keep everything even all the way across. And just hold it down. You could, with this, it's hard to pin through this plastic, but you could put a weight on it. It's small enough that I can just hold it down. You'll have to excuse my wounds. I have cats, and they sit there and they beg you to pet them, and then instead of walking away when they're done, they like to attack. And then you just draw around that. And then I take this is the one for the fabric. This is the one, this is going to include your seam allowance. So I just line it up. I have these little registration marks on the side to match up. And then I drew around this one. It's really, really simple. This outer one, as long as you have enough of a seam allowance that you're not going to fall apart when you turn them around, if you get a little off balance and a little wobbly, it's not going to affect it. This is the line you're going to be following when you're sewing. And this is the one you want to have a nice little curve to. Now it's the same thing with the purple fabric. Because it's sequiny, I only cut one piece of ear at a time instead of cutting out the whole ear. This fabric, I guess just the way it drapes at the bottom for a dance costume or something, but it has fabric beyond the sequins. And I knew that's not what Kelsey would want. So I made sure that when I placed it away from the edge and away from anywhere that there was going to be an issue. And I traced them around. 4 of these, front and back for 2 ears. There's my 4 ears. Oh, my 4 pieces for my 2 ears. Now these, of course, you're going to sew them right side together. And you really only need to have the sewing line on one of them. But for on the Lilo and Stitch, of course, I needed it on both sides so I can get the design in the center properly. And these, you'll find as you're working with the sequins, all these little pieces will come off and you'll have little bits of sequins. I tried shaking it, but just like cutting fun fur, there's always going to be extra. As you're cutting the sequin fabric, you can do it over a piece of paper or a trash can, or just take your chances and clean it up afterwards. Now with my Lilo and Stitch, I wanted to make sure that if this was the front of my ear and Lilo and Stitch were face up, that the back would also be face up. So I matched the 2 designs so that one ear would have the wave and one in the kiss, and when you saw the back of the ears, it would be opposites. You'd still have an ear with a smile and a wave and an ear with a kiss. So I just went ahead and I put some pins in. And to keep the designs lined up, I just found a spot in the center. I folded this and made a little crease. And I put my pin in the line. And then I just went over to the other side and I made sure that when my pin came out, it was in the center at that line also. And the same thing in all 4 quadrants. I just made sure where it went through on one side on a line, it came through on the other. If this is off just a little bit, I traced it off a little, or I just got it just a little miscombobulated. The fullness of when you stuff it will balance that out. You can also put pins on these 2 corners here to make sure they line up. And then when we stitch, we're going to stitch on this sewing line, and we'll stitch all the way around, leaving this part open, because this is where we're going to stuff it from. Same on this one. These, because it's a sequin fabric, I will probably go ahead and pin it. As you can see, I just roughly cut around them. That's why they're not perfectly matching. But after I sew the sewing line, I can just go ahead and trim around. I didn't want to get too close because of the sequins. I wasn't sure how it was going to work when I stitched it, so I wanted to make sure I had extra room. While Lilo and Stitch, other than in certain sections, as you can see, I roughly cut it. I mostly wanted to go through and hit the right spots. Okay, let's head over to the machine and we'll go ahead and stitch these together. Alright, can everyone see? For Lilo and Stitch, all I'm using is white thread in my bobbin and white thread in my top thread. I could have used this pale blue and matched it perfectly, but I'm going to go ahead and shorten my stitch just a little bit, and it'll hold it nice and tight, and the color of the thread won't show through anyways. I would never want to use something like a black or a really dark color, because I wouldn't want those threads to show through at all after it's stitched and we turn it. Just let me put us down just a little bit. Giving a shorter stitch length will hold the stitches better, and they won't spread out as much, because sometimes if you're going to stuff something, as you're shoving all that stuffing in, it will sometimes separate a little and you'll see the thread. But if we go down, let's see, my machine is normally a 2.5 when you just automatically start it up, and that's the stitch length they have. So I'm going to drop it down to a 1.4. A lot of people recommend a 1.5, but mine goes from 1.6 to 1.4. So we're going to go with a 1.4. Now we have to be careful. You don't want to sew over your pins because you could break a needle and that could be dangerous. You don't want to poke your eye out. I'm going to start just a little bit past where it curves here, and then I'm going to back stitch to that spot. If I start right here and come forward and back stitch, I can do that. But for my machine, it tends to leave too much of a bulk of a stitch there, and sometimes it gets all tangled up in the back. So I found, for me, it's better to go ahead and start forward a little and go backwards. Drop my needle. I like to bring up my thread, my bobbin thread. If you just hold on to this thread, when you bring your needle back up, your bobbin thread will come with it, and you can pull it out. And a lot of times that'll stop that mess of thread, the bird's nest on the back. So put my needle back down, back stitch a little bit. If you can't see the exact line, you're going to be able to see here, and let's face it, we're just making Mickey Mouse ears here. We're not going for perfect 1/4" seams and getting all our points exactly right. We just want to make sure we go around and everything works just about right. You can go a little bit slower because we're going around a curve, and we're going to want to turn our fabric as we're turning. Even if you don't make Mickey Mouse ears, it's a really good lesson to learn on going around corners and curves. My machine has a small, medium, and fast. I tend to always sew on the fast, but when I'm doing circles, I'll come down to the medium because that keeps me from racing too far ahead. All right, ready? I'm going to go ahead and spin around here, and as I'm doing it, I'm just going to slowly guide my fabric. When I notice that my circle's a little too far this way, and I want to keep it more into the front, I will lift my foot up and just bring the bulk of the fabric a little bit closer. If you're going this way, you're not going to get a nice, even, smooth turn. So if you have at least a little bit, ½ inch, ¼ inch in front of you, it'll make your curve a little smoother. Once again, it's a Mickey Mouse ears. They're going to get a little wrinkled around the edges. It just is what it is. Take my pin out. A couple fingers holding the fabric, and as I'm going to slowly guide it through, not too fast because you don't want to get wrinkles. The smaller the circumference of the diameter of the circle, the more you're going to have to lift your foot and spin it. If we were making a really big circle, this one's about 3½, 4 inches. If we were going really large, maybe an 8 or 12 inch one, we wouldn't have to turn it as often. I'm going to go ahead and finish sewing this, and I'll meet you around at the edge. Now when we get back to this point again, we are going to want to back stitch and set that seam. Because if we don't, when we go to turn it inside out and we're forcing it and stuffing it, that seam will come undone and it'll slowly spread up there. A little bit of back stitching. All set. See? All sewn around. Like I said, we went mainly from the front circle, and I look and all my ears and everything are all within, so it's going to work out fine. If you didn't get it perfectly on the back, as long as your character is going to stay within where you need them, you'll be fine. I'm going to go ahead and sew this next one, change my thread, and then I'll show you how I do the sequin. Okay, let's sew some sequin fabric. Now we're basically going to do the same thing. We're going to start here, back stitch, stitch around to there. We're going to actually sew, I tested on a small piece of scrap of this fabric before I did it. If I go on a medium speed and I don't rush through this, my machine will sew right through the sequins. Sometimes it'll miss it and go on the side, some through the center, some right through it. Always test it first to make sure your machine can handle it, because you don't want to break any needles. If your machine doesn't like the sequin fabric, you might either have to glue it or sew it by hand. Now, as I said, I'm going to go slow. I'm going to be turning this, and we're going to take it easy on the sequins. If it starts to get hung up in your machine, you can always, don't tug hard from the back, but just give a nice slight pressure to help guide it through. And you see you're going to find all these little pieces of broken sequins everywhere. Can you see my hands back here just giving slight pressure? You gotta let the feed dogs do their job, but sometimes it helps to just guide it through. Okay, I'm gonna keep sewing around, and after I get down to the end, I'll do the second one, and then we'll meet back up. As you're going, you might want to peek just to make sure everything's going together nicely, and because we used a smaller stitch length, it seems to be holding pretty well. Okay, our circles are all sewn, and as usual, I forgot that we're going to use some pinking shears. These will give, see how they got the teeth on it? If we trim around Lilo and Stitch, I'm going to go about 1/4 of an inch around it, just to give it a little. When we turn these around, a curve tends to pucker if it doesn't have some stretch to the fabric. These little notches in here will allow the fabric to stretch a little bit and lay a little better. If you don't have pinking shears, you just take your regular fabric, keep your seam allowance about 1/4 of an inch or less, and you stitch close to, but not past, your stitch line. This will also allow the fabric to stretch a little, and it'll release it and allow it to have that smooth line. I don't always like to cut them little slits all the time, so I just use pinking shears. Once again, I'm still just making sure that I don't get near that stitching line, because otherwise we'll have to stitch it again. That being said, if you accidentally cut into it, just go back to your machine and restitch that section. This part I'm not going to worry about because this is where we're going to tuck it in and fold it through. I just did a little test cut, and these scissors go pretty well through the sequins, so I'm going to go ahead and not too close, definitely a 1/4 inch or more from my sewing line, which since I sewed it with purple thread it's a little bit harder to see, but since I have the dark ink, that when I traced it with blue, I'll be able to follow that. I'll just go ahead and go around there. I have a feeling we're not going to get a nice smooth circle with the sequins just because the sequins are in the way. Here we go. It takes a little bit of force because I'm cutting through sequins, but the way these are stitched on, it seems to be stitched on in like a hexagon fashion all around the sequin, so they seem to be held on pretty well. So if I cut those threads on the outside here, it's not going to matter anyway. They say when you're doing like a costume, they recommend you remove all the sequins from the seam allowance. But what's our motto this week? They're just Mickey Mouse ears. It'll be okay. And of course, I have sequins everywhere. I have a feeling using pinking shears on the sequins is not going to really matter very much for us because of the sequins. But I've done it. I feel like I've done my job. Okay. Let me clean up. I think I'm going to be cleaning sequins out of my sewing room for months to come. Alright. And once again, as I said, sometimes as I'm winging these things, I forget certain supplies. These are hemostats, curved ones. This is just a thin dowel rod that came in my package of stuffing that helps you stuff it into like the arms and things of narrow creatures and such like that. You can use a brand new pencil. Some people use the tips of their scissors to push things out, but I tend to go through the seam and I don't want to take that chance. If this were a tighter piece, we could take our hemostats, put them inside the little slit at the bottom that you didn't sew closed, tuck the fabric in a little and grab it, and then just pull it through. But these should be small enough or large enough that I can just stick my fingers in and pull it through. And then what I do, this end is blunt. I like to take this and just run it along here gently. Another thing you can use if you happen to be a crocheter, this is one of the large plastic crochet hooks, and I can push this right along the seam and get a nice round edge without having to worry too much about popping the seam. Now see how we used a really tight stitch, so as we stuff it, we're not going to see the stitching. Since we went slow around the corners, around the circle, and we used our pinking shears, we have a pretty good, nice round curve to the ears. See, we kept Lilo and Stitch on the inside. We're really not losing any of their features. Now let's see what happens with the sequin one. Sequins everywhere. Look at that mess. Gently push them out. We might have some sequins that stick straight out from the seam, like these will. If that bothers you after you stuff it and it still sticks out, we can go ahead and take scissors, and if you just trim through these, they'll just pop right off. Once again, Mickey Mouse ears, I don't think it'll be an issue. Now see the difference with the sequins, that we're not getting a perfectly round edges like we did with the Lilo and Stitch, but it's okay. As we stuff it, these seams will open up just a little bit and it'll give you more of a rounded hump. You can do this over a garbage can if you want, so you don't have to worry about the sequins everywhere, or maybe put an old paper bag down from the grocery store or some school paper to catch it, or just wing it. I tend to be a just wing it type of crafter. It's okay. So there's all our ears. Let's do Lilo and Stitch first. When you're dealing with fiberfill, you have to kind of fluff it up a little. If you didn't have fiber fill and you really don't want to buy a big bag just for this, you can use cotton balls. Just once again, pull the cotton balls out a little bit. Take about half of that, and we're going to go ahead. See, since we backstitched, as we're pulling on this, the seam isn't coming undone. Sequin stuck to me. Stuff it in. What I like to do, because this is a rounded item, I like to kind of push it off to the side so I get that nice rounded edge. If you put big chunks in here, you're going to see chunks and you're going to have empty spots like this. So if you take smaller pieces and put them in where they need to go, it'll work out good. You'd be surprised by how much stuffing actually goes into these ears. Okay, see now this one, it doesn't have the foam in it, and I think that's going to stand up perfectly fine by itself. And what I'll do is I'll just make sure and get the stuffing nice and tight around the edges, and it'll hold its shape. So you get a little divot over there, just pop some stuffing in. And I'm leaving right now, I have a space where my finger fits in easily in the center, and I'm leaving that spot open, and I will fill that up as I go. See my nice ear? Now, as a test, I'm going to go ahead and cut a piece of the manila envelope and put it in the other ear so we can see the difference and see if it helps pull out some of these wrinkles. Now we have to leave room here because what we're going to do is we're going to fold this in and we're going to glue it onto the headband like this. So we need to leave some room for all of that. But you want to have it still stuffed, so you're just going to have to work at it little by little until you find just the right stuffing and feeling you want. Some of the tutorials I watched had you taking 3 of the 1/4-inch foam pieces and gluing them together, but I don't think they're going to really stuff it as much as we are. So I'm going to go ahead and kind of roll this up a little bit, pop it in. Okay, see, this is probably going to give us a little bit of a rounded thing. Now what we're going to do is we're going to stuff on the front of the cardboard and on the back. Once again, the smaller pieces are going to make it go in there smoother for you. This way, with the cardboard in there, we're not going to stuff it as much. Little in the front, little in the back. Little in the front, little in the back. So now here's our 2 different, this one is the regular, and this one has the cardboard in it. I like the one with the cardboard in it better, so we're going to go ahead with that one. It seems to, this one makes it puff up too high, and this one keeps it a little puffy, but we still get that nice rounded edge that we like. We don't have to put as much stuffing in to give it that padded look. So what do you think? If you had more of the foam in there, I could see where it would hold it a little bit stiffer, but I think ours are going to be perfectly fine. So it's a personal preference whether you want big and poofy or you just want flat and puffy. So I think for Kelsey's, we're going to stick with the flat and puffy one. I've used this in ears before, this Timtex. It's pretty stiff interfacing, and that would also hold the ears up. You might want to use double layers of this also. Okay, I have my hot glue gun heating up. I have it on a plate, so if the glue's going to drip, it's not if it drips, it's when it drips. I'll have the plate to catch it, so I won't hopefully ruin or burn anything. Now, to decide where you want to put your ears, did you see my ears? I tried to stuff them to the same amount of firmness. Sometimes you just notice you got to add a little extra, squish it around. There. Make sure they're just about the same firmness. It's not going to be an exact thing. You're going to spend a lot of time putting it in, taking it out, putting stuffing in and taking it out. Now you can put your headbands on your head and see about where you want to have them. It depends on how big your head is, because on how your headband is, because the black one is a little bit longer than the blue one. Remember with these, I want to have, so I have Lilo waving on one and kissing on the other, and then when you see them, when you see Kelsey from behind, you'll have the same just on the other side. Now if you have a large head, if you put them in one spot and you put it on your head, it'll bring it forward. If you put them way down here, and you put it on your head, it'll keep it more to the side. Some of the tutorials I watched, they said about 2 inches from center. So I just take my tape measure. I'm about 14.5 inches, so about 7.25 is center. You could use some type of marking tool to mark it, but then you have to worry about whether or not it's going to be seen after. So I'm just going to take a pin at 7.25 because these headbands are covered with fabric, so I can mark that. Then I will go 2 inches from center in either direction and put more pins. Being careful not to stab myself. And remember, you want to have these symmetrical and you want them similar, but if it gets to be just a little bit off, it's going to get to be a little bit off. Nobody's going to complain, really, because who's going to measure your head to make sure you have your headbands and your ears in exactly the right spot? Now make sure you just don't go automatically and say 7.25 for your next one, because your other headband is 15. So this one, our halfway, is 7.5. And then 2 inches from there, okay. You might want to add tape measure to your list of supplies. I told you I wasn't really good at making a list of supplies in the video. So what we're going to do now, as you see, we have the cardboard in there, the file folder. You could feel it. The edges are nice and stiff, so it's going to keep it nice. Now we're going to put this into the center. We're going to glue it onto the center of the headband. And we're going to hope that sometimes they tend to go a little bit back and a little bit forward. So we're going to be generous with our glue, but not so much that it squishes out. When you look at these, you just kind of see, based on the way you stuffed, like this piece looks like it might want to go folded in, and this piece might want to be over the top. And I think a lot of it just has to do with how much stuffing is on each side. Now to put this one down is no problem. You can glue that down, which I probably will put a little bit of glue there, or you can just hold it. But this one, if we were just to fold this one over, when we glue it onto our headband, we have the potential of having some of these rough edges show. So when we go to glue the second piece down, we want to try to fold this piece a little bit before we glue it over this one. Now I think I'm going to have to do this off camera because I have a feeling my fingers are going to be in the way, but we're going to try it. See how the glue, now remember, this glue, I don't know the temperature it comes out, but it comes out extremely hot. I'm going to put a little bead of glue right through here just to tuck this one down to hold it. Just a little. Now I'm going to push down with my hand, but remember, hot glue is hot. So if you have a little popsicle stick, or you can just use your fingers or your turning stick, whatever works. Hot glue sets pretty quickly, so you just kind of hold it for a second. Okay, and then we're going to take this one, as I said, we're going to fold the edges over a little. I'm going to run a bead of glue on here, which is going to be a lot easier to fold this one over and hold it. If you are having issues, you can run a holding stitch with thread. You can use a glue stick, or if you just kind of give it a little drag with your fingers and press it down, it should hold it. Alright, moment of truth. Oh, by the way, you can get these little mini glue guns and glue sticks at the Dollar Tree. They should come with glue, but it's been a while since I bought the actual gun. But it's always good to buy extra sticks because you don't realize how much glue you're really going to go through. Hot, 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 hot. Sorry guys, gotta go off camera. Okay, so I basically have this glued. It's not glued perfectly. It's quite ugly. But this is the part that's going to get glued onto here. And as you can see, we're not going to see that mess. So let me glue the other ear. They have little silicone rubber fingertip cotton things, whatever they call them, that you can buy at Michael's and stuff. Kathy Fillion and her crafting partner sell them. And then you can push down, and it's heat resistant. You won't feel the heat from the glue. They do a lot of gluing, so they know what they're talking about. It's going to be the same thing with the sequins. It's probably just going to be a little bit more fiddly. Because we're dealing with sequins. I've been putting it up against my belly and let my belly hold it like an extra pair of hands. We're going to get the shape that we want when we glue it onto the headbands. I have a feeling that these are definitely going to be a little bit more fiddly than they already are. These, for whatever reason, because I think I had the little extra fabric here, if you leave a little extra fabric on the end, it just tucks in really easy. And you're not going to get as much fraying with the fabric because this is a knit fabric, and the sequins will hold everything in there nicely. Alright, so I'm going to take out my center one. We don't need that pin. And I'm going to be adding this in the center and pushing it down. Now the cardboard inside has that curve cut out of it already. So as I'm pushing down, I can feel that. So I'm going to make sure that I push it down far enough to hold that. And I put my pin about in the center. And I put my ear about in the center. If we have to afterwards, we can add a little extra glue. And you really could, these are fabric covered, so you could stitch it down if you had to. I'm going to put my glue on the ear and then put it on the headband, because I feel that that gives you more power, because if you put the glue on here and it's not exactly where the headband is, the glue is going to be there and you're going to be able to see it. So we're going to put a decent amount without going too much. I know that's not an exact measurement and it's not an exact way for you to figure out what you're doing. But maybe make a set for your dogs or your kids first and practice on them, so that when you get to yours, it'll be perfect. At least that's how I try to do things. Put a good amount. Find your center. Cross your fingers. Stick it all down. Hot glue sticks real quick, so just hold it for a second. It's one of the good parts about the cardboard. You can just hold it. And then I'm just going to go ahead and put a couple pins in just to hold it. So when I move on to the next one, I don't have to worry about it as much. if you were to sew it by hand, this is what you would want to do also. Pin it down and then just do a nice hidden whip stitch in there, a ladder stitch. So if you were to whip stitch it either after you glued it or instead of gluing it, you could always take this extra fabric that sometimes gets left here and stitch that down. We can also add a little bit of extra glue in there and then just hold these down. All depends on how it looks. Okay, let's do the next ear. Since I've got the one wave, I have to make sure I have the other one as the kiss. Squeeze it down. Kind of just bring that fabric down to cover up that glue. Check the back. We'll go ahead and pin this one in too. So there's one side and the other. Now Kelsey likes to have a big bow in between. She never brings me fabric to make it. She usually just buys a bow herself. And then she either have a clip or a bobby pin or something. Or if she needs to, I will stitch it on for her. Okay, while that one's drying, let's go ahead and do the next. I want to check. This one has, the hole seems to be smaller than the cardboard inside that I can feel. So I want to see when I push down about where the center is. So I can go all the way up to here and down to here. You can feel it. Okay. We see this one I got a little bit off. Don't tell Kelsey and she will never know, right? It'll be fine. I'll just off-center the other one just a little bit too. And you see, yeah, you can see the strings glistening. So there's always strings from hot glue. And one of the things with hot glue is to make things look a little bit more professional is if you take those hot strings off. You can pull them off, you can clip them off. I guess you could hit them with something like, if you heated up a pin, if you took one of these pins and just heated it up, you could probably touch it and it would come off. But most of the times you can just pull it off or trim it off with scissors. This fabric's a little bit harder to stick a pin through because of the sequins. I think for my own peace of mind, I will probably take a matching thread. I think that one has hot glue on it. I'll take a matching thread and I'll go ahead and just stitch these down a little bit. Just, I don't know, the weight of the sequins and everything, it makes me worried. I made this. I want to make sure that when Kelsey wears it and bops around and is walking, that she's not worried about her ears falling off, because nobody wants to lose an ear when you're at the park, right? But I think definitely with the sequins, we're going to need to hand stitch this down just for security. Okay, so I'll put a little glue in there. Probably not quite as much as I did with the cotton one. Stick it on. See, that's the part about stitching along with me and crafting with me. I don't like, that's why I call them untutorials, because we're going to learn together and figure this out as we go. And you can see my mistakes and how I fixed them, and learn a trick or two for yourself so that when you do it, maybe you won't have to worry about the same things that I did. It's teamwork, right? Okay, so when I stitch this on, I'll bring these pieces of fabric down, stitch it through the headband fabric, and it'll hold it in place. So what do you think? So far so good? This one is much lighter feeling to me. Seems the sequins add a lot of weight to these ears. But I'm pretty sure Kelsey will love them because she loves all of these things. Now, when Kelsey sends over all her supplies for these ears, she always sends enough fabric in case I make a mistake and have to start over. But then she also sends me bonus fabric. This one is the cars. And this one's this beautiful John Deere fabric. Nice vibrant colors. Now, Kelsey has a 4 or 5-year-old son, I think he might be 5 now, that loves bow ties. So she knows that if she sends me extra fabric, that she says I can do whatever I want with it. But I like making bow ties for her boy because he's just so adorable in them. And I'll go ahead and probably make bow ties out of both of this fabric for him. And if you're interested, I will take you along on that journey too. I'm going to go ahead and let these dry a little bit more. Even though it dries instantly, I want to make sure it's dried well. As I clean up, they'll finish drying. Then I'll take some needle and thread and I will stitch them on securely so I know that they're staying. Even if I use just needle and thread, there's a chance that they could still wobble a little, but the hot glue will center them and hold them there, and then the needle or thread will make sure that they stay on perfectly. The thing with hot glue is over time it also disintegrates. It gets dry and brittle and the ears could pop off. But between using the two things together, it'll ensure that the ears stay on well and they will last for a long time. You could use something like Gorilla Glue, or I probably wouldn't use like a tacky glue. I don't think that'll hold the weight of the ears. But some type of super glue or Gorilla Glue might work. But once again, I would worry the heat of Florida that the glue would disintegrate and there would have to be some type of reinforcement still. So I'm going to go ahead and use both of these things so that I know in my heart that her ears are going to stay on. And between you and I, if they look a little crooked, I'm just going to tell her it's her head, that she has a crooked head, and it's not my ears, right? Alright, stay tuned, and I will pop a little video at the end of this video to show you how I did the little stitching for the ears, and then the final results. If Kelsey sends me pictures of either her wearing them or with the bows that she has chosen, I'll go ahead and show those to you guys too at a later time. Okay guys, now I'm going to go ahead and show you how I use some tacking stitches to hold these on to make sure with the wiggles and the jiggles that the glue doesn't disintegrate and that they stayed on. I'll show you a close-up. Both of these have been stitched on. Let me tell you, going through the sequins, now you see right here there's a little bit of glue from the hot glue that I'll have to pick off. But I'll just take a little tweezers or something and pick that off. It'll be fine. They have some nice sparkle to them. Now Lilo and Stitch, I have to stitch these on. What I did is I just got some regular dual duty Coats and Clark. This color happens to be 5270 if anyone cares. It's a nice blue turquoise. It goes well with the headband. It's a little bit darker than the ears, but that's okay. Let's see. I stitched this one on already. Now if you're going to get up really close, you can see some of the stitches because of the darker thread. But that's okay, because if someone's getting up to the top of your head, you know, smack them. Tell them to get away from you. So now I'm right-handed, and I stitch from right to left. Some people are right-handed and go from left to right, but this is just the way I do it. I have doubled my sewing thread. I have my thread doubled. I have a knot on the end and just your basic sewing needle. Bring it up, pull a little on this end, pull on this end, makes your needle right in the center. Now, I go in close to the hot glue, and I want to bury my knot underneath. When I pull this fabric, I know I'm going to pull it to at least here. So if I go in here, right to where the hot glue is, so I'm just outside the hot glue, stick my needle in, push it through, till I can grab it from the other side. And that's going to bury my knot underneath there. See what I mean before about sometimes the thread, the frayed ends will show if you don't get it hot glued down right? We'll fix that with this stitching. So I came out of the ears, and I'm going to come forward a little. This one's a little harder because once again we have sequins to deal with. I'm going to come forward just a little bit and grab a bite of the headband and pull it through. We're going to go around the ears just once, but if you need to, if you didn't pull it far enough forward, you can go around again. I'm going to take a small bite of the fabric. You're going to get tangled around the ears and around the headbands, so just have some patience. Now I'm going to give it a little tug. Once I have double strands, it makes the thread stronger, and it's going to be stronger for security of the ears and stronger so that I can pull on them. So now this one came out of the ears, then I'm going to go back through and grab a bite of headband. It's about 1/4 of an inch, a little more, a little less. Grab a piece just past where you were of the head. Make sure you're not too tangled. We go close, give it a little pull. See how it's going to pull the ears down? It's going to get rid of this big gap here, and it's going to smooth everything out. Go around a sequin. So you're just going to keep going, ears, headband, ears, headband, until we get to this side over here. Now since I'm coming out here, I want to go a little bit past that because I don't want to pull on the fabric enough and create a hole from where I was just at. I tend to grab a bigger bite out of the headband than I do. See how small this one is here for the ears? Come on. And then I might go a little bit more through the headbands. Almost twice that size, really. Like 1/8 of an inch for the ears and 1/4 of an inch for the headband. I don't know why, it's just something I've always done with my binding, and it works for me. But see how that's pulling the ear down and smoothing it out a little bit? I know if I put it in here and I can pull it, I know exactly where I can go and grab the headband. You can do it all in one motion, ears and headband. Or you can just do the headband and then grab the ear. And that's really just about it. Go around the edge. I'll take and I'll go on either side of the seam. See, my needle went in on this side of the seam and I'm coming out on that side. And that way I can pull that whole seam down. and it stops you having too big of a gap right in this section. And that's it. I'm going to go ahead and get to the end, and then I'll come back and show you how I tie a knot. Okay, I've made it around, and I've tucked in that piece of loose fabric. I've ended where I've come out of the headband. So I'm just going to take a little bite of the ear, and I'm not going to pull the loop all the way through. I'm going to go through this loop once and twice, and that's going to form a knot. And I just go slow, because when you get double threads, sometimes they can get hung up. And I just take it through my headband or my ears for a little bit down the way, and I just pull it through. If you give a little tug and then cut it close to wherever you're at, the ears of the headband, after you snip it, the loose ends will go all the way through and they will disappear. So there we go. Lilo and Stitch and Ursula. So that's how I make stuffed Mickey Mouse ears. If you have any questions, just leave them down below in the comments, and I will do the best I can to help you out. You guys have a great day. Bye.